but right now it's a lot of young guys. Just like somebody just tweeted that the final two spots is going to come down to Nico or and Kadarius Tony. And that says a lot for Sky Moore that the Chiefs could have took George Pickens there, with the pick.
Oh
but
my
God,
God,
just
Vance,
but
what
it
are
is
we
what it is.
doing?
But
Go
it
from
is what it
Tyreek
is.
Hill to George Pickens. No thanks.
I'm just saying. But again, he got to step up because I'm rooting for the kid, man. I want to see what they saw from
You know
him.
what? I keep thinking about this, and I'm just wondering what is going on with him. Is anything going on with him? Because he has a ton of ability. I mean, he's played multiple positions. He played running back, running back through high school, in and around the Pittsburgh area for, his high school. He played running back when he first got to Western Michigan, then became a great receiver at Western Michigan, where you had like guys from AB and who's the kid from the Packers that's on TV a lot. I'll think of his name. But, they've had kind of a run of wide receivers that came from Western Michigan. He was like the next guy. So what is it? What's happening? Because they scouted him pretty deep. I'm sure they scouted him very well. They made him a second-round pick, and it just isn't working. And I guess that just happens. You're going to whiff sometimes.
You're going to whiff. Yeah.
But I just wonder, just the kid, where is he at in his head? Is he in his head too much now because he kind of realizes this is it?
Yeah. It's just a lack of confidence right now.
Frustrating.
It's frustrating for him. I'm sure. Again, we talked about this over and over again. I mean, you look at his game film, as you mentioned, I mean, great route runner, great hands, knew where to be on the field, got the yak, did everything that you would expect from, a guy who was worthy of being drafted number 2. And I think, when he started to fumble kickoffs, he lost his
the punts,
punts. And he had a couple turnovers. But then in the championship game, he steps up and makes a big play on the punt return. So, he scored the touchdown in the Super Bowl, his first and only touchdown, I believe, of his career. So, listen, I think it's going to be hard pressed for him to make this roster. I think this is the one where Brett Veach is going to have to
certainly
say,
it
didn't work.
Yeah. That's why we got 81, man.
All right, but he's, there's a lot of young guys, on this roster that
and a lot of practices and games between now and cut down dates. So I mean, he's by no means lost, but it's just, to me, just looking at it as a fan, as somebody that's, I guess, looks at this stuff daily for a long time, it's just kind of perplexing as to what is missing, what's going on. I mean, he spends time with Patrick in Texas during the offseason prior to OTAs and everything else.
It's just the confidence and the mental. It's just the confidence.
It's got to be a mental block.
Because
it really
think
does.
about it, guys. He got good hands. He's a good route runner. It's the mental. It's something in him. It's mental.
And he's got huge hands. I mean, that was one of the big things when he was coming out, when he was at the combine, how large his hands were. So
it's not like
catching the ball, you wouldn't think would be a problem. And I feel bad for him, actually, because even though he's not necessarily to think that he was going to be a great player, but he would be able to compete. And especially in this situation where he's competing for his professional life, I don't know. You guys talk about him getting traded. What's the market? Who's going to give anything?
He was high on a lot of draft boards.
He was, but ain't no market
absolutely
right now
coming in the draft
confidence.
process. Everybody that talked about him, he was like their sleeper pick, and maybe that was it too. Is where like there's too many people thinking that he's a sleeper pick. That's not usually a good thing.
To me, it's just a big inconsistency, guys. Like, I'm hard on these players, but right now, Sky Moore was my guy. But you inconsistent. If you're inconsistent, you got to go. I mean, you got to get demoted. You're inconsistent. I mean, listen, everything has to be out there on that field. Like, the potential is there, but at the same time, Mahomes can't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is, if he can't trust you, bro, you got to step back. Step back and take care of your confidence.
Well, you got to make plays. I mean, he's had a lot of drops in practice too.
Like Kadarius Toney, it's like they got all the potential in the world, but you're not showing it on the field. Like, to me, I'm like, no, take a step back. Take a step back to your group.
He's watching every day in practice, Remigio's, first string after Watson left. That means he's moved ahead of all these guys, including Tony. And, and that's the beauty. And, there's some veterans here on this football team that might not make the roster because they've got some youth and they've got some young guys that can step in and step up. And that's the best part about, the makeup of this football team right now is, they've drafted well. They've got some second-year guys. And I think it's crucial for them to, allow these kids as many reps as possible and make it work. And again, they're doing all this and they're trying to three-peat. They're trying to go back to back to back, and they're not changing a thing about how they approach it, and they're not changing anything about if a young guy is better than a veteran, even if you're a high draft pick, you're going to play more than the person that's struggling, and that has not always been the case in Kansas City. And number 81 is a perfect example. He's just a player.
He's going to be the other part of it.
He's going to be a third down guy.
If you look down the roster of players where they have the ages, there's 90% of the roster is 25 or younger.
It's just insane.
I mean, it's so you got a couple of veteran guys. Now you call McCall a veteran because he's just been in the league a little bit longer. And some of these guys have been like 3 or 4 years in the league, but for the most part, it's a very young roster. I mean, Travis obviously is the exception, like way out there. Hell, Patrick's one of the oldest guys on the team.
He's one of the older guys,
and he's a kid.
He's the third oldest guy in offense.
So, yeah, I mean, that's why I said maybe I'm not thinking this, but to me, I still think we're in the infancy stages of this dynasty. It's just going to continue. Outside of injury or all of a sudden they start drafting poorly, which doesn't look like that's going to happen.
No, they fixed whatever they fixed.
The biggest problems they're going to have, and I think I said it before the show, is figuring out which one of these great young players gets a second deal. Mm-hmm. And again, I was just talking about the defensive backs and T-Cuffs. Obviously, he's got the inside track at that, and everything is, health related, but guys like Jalen Watson, guys like Joshua Williams, it's going to be hard for them to get a second contract.
Ryan Cook, I mean, yeah,
because they keep backfilling those positions with young dudes, and between Spags and Dave Merritt, I don't know that there's any place a young DB, especially if you're like a third round pick and on, to go and they're going to get the most out of you. And you're going to be the best version of yourself. No, I don't. It just doesn't look like it. Now, again, that's no disrespect to the other great defensive back coaches in the league, and I know there's many of them, but we just see this time and time, year after year, and these guys just come along, and they come along quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to be, I think, the biggest problem is judging who gets those second contracts.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. You pretty much have to go back to the Hank Stram era where he would play rookies. He'd play young guys. I mean, I know it was a different game back then, but it's just impressive.
No free agency.
Yeah, there was no free agency. You had to fight the NFL for your players. And, you draft a guy like, Xavier Worthy, you have big expectations. He's
a keeper. He's yours for life.
He's your part of your team for as long as you want to pay him.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not always been the modus operandi of how the Chiefs run office. It wasn't that way under Carl. I mean, Carl's contract battles with Tony Gonzalez and Jared Allen were some legendary stuff. I'll go into that one of these days. But at the end of the day, it's a completely different philosophy. And we've never had a general manager until Brett Veach who's looked ahead. Okay, I got Snead. He's going to be a free agent in a year or two. We might have to move him. I got to get a young stud cornerback. So, he goes out and gets McDuffie. He hits on Watson. And just these things just kind of fall into place. But, he's done his due diligence. Now Snead's gone. Connor's up to bat. Hopefully Nazeeh Johnson is fine. I think Nazeeh Johnson's going to start this year if he's healthy. So, again, this is not anything we're doing. And you're right, Lou. This this roster's got a roster full of babies, and that's not to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
They've just got some young dudes.
And it has to be that way just because
it's the only way to survive.
Again, you're paying Patrick, you're paying Chris Jones, Kelsey, top of market at his position. It's not a ton, but still, a couple offensive linemen are paid right now, and Juwan Taylor. We'll see what happens with the interior guys. With the way they drafted this year, it doesn't look like Tooney's going to get extended.
Got it.
So, and the left tackles are babies, so they're at least the next 3 or 4 years they're kind of, they know who their guys are. We'll just see what happens with Creed and Trey.